this week, with COP26, is a critical week for the health of our planet. It is within a year of great uncertainty and great change. But it also is within a decade of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. For more than the past year, during the COVID pandemic, the WWF team and I have been listening with leaders from the public and private sector, Indigenous communities, scientists and policymakers. In fact, I did a Goodwill Hunters podcast series looking at what Australia needs to do to be a world-leading sustainability superpower just last month. However, I wanted to start with a reflection on a moment that happened just last month. In April 1775, an express rider rode from Boston to Lexington, Massachusetts. Paul Revere's midnight ride is part of American history, but is also one of those stories from Malcolm Gladwell's famous book, The Tipping Point. For those of you who have read the book, the tipping point is the magic moment when an idea, a trend, social behaviour crosses a threshold, tips and spreads like wildfire. I believe that in Australia, we are at that moment when it comes to action on climate. Last month, the Queensland Deputy Premier, Stephen Miles, announced a relatively small project for the Queensland port of Gladstone. Gladstone will soon become the home to the world's largest green hydrogen manufacturing facility. It will double the global production of hydrogen electrolyzers capacity. Yes, double it. It means that Gladstone will have an outsized impact on the decarbonising of the world. It will soon be local Queenslanders building the clean technology that we need to help decarbonise the world faster and the speed needed to ensure a safe climate for us all. It places Gladstone at the centre of climate solutions for the world. Now, this project is a great example of the kind of industry diversification and job creation that acting on climate change can deliver with state government support. But is Gladstone our tipping point? In my recent podcast with Andrew Forrest, he said to me, and I quote, "We need to encourage our society to accept the opportunity of climate change of global warming, because as the world transitions to renewables to combat global warming, there are enormous opportunities and enormous potential for job growth here in Australia." Andrew is right, but Gladstone is just the tip of the iceberg. Investing billions of dollars into regional towns and cities across Australia would help Australia become a 700% renewable energy country. Yes, forget about 100%, we need to aim for 7 times that. Reaching this 700% renewables target by 2050 would enable us as Australia to meet not only our current electricity demands, but switch our current transport, our industries, our buildings to renewables away from gas, coal and oil. Produce renewable hydrogen fuels for export, send renewable power to Asia via sea cables and manufacture new renewable powered zero carbon products like green steel. WWF has identified 6 export opportunities that Australia is uniquely positioned to capitalise on. Now, these are on the slide here and are available on the report, so I'm not going to go through them in detail, but hydrogen production, which is a very hot topic at the moment, is a great opportunity for the Australian government and for Australian states to realise an export opportunity, but we're really selling ourselves short if we stop there. We really need a comprehensive plan to capture the full breadth of our renewable export opportunities. We must consider what the world's leading solar and wind resources, crucial minerals, strong trading relationships and expertise of Australia can unlock in terms of both upstream and downstream supply chains and the associated new jobs and new exports. We must also think about what commodities, products and services that we can make and offer more cheaply and more cleanly with renewables. This includes everything from hydrogen to green steel to green aluminium. But perhaps this is all green hype. To see what action was needed in this decade and the opportunities of investing in clean energy exports, WWF, the Australian Conservation Foundation, the ACTU and the Business Council of Australia released last month a national report. It found that Australia could create 395,000 new jobs and generate 89 billion in new trade by 2040. Yes, that's 400,000 new jobs, 10 times more than is employed in the current coal sector. Now, the report found that the largest clean export opportunities are in renewable hydrogen and ammonia, green metals, critical minerals, battery manufacturing, education, training, engineering, ITC and consulting services. We need to be making smart investments in our regional communities now, particularly those that depend on carbon-intensive industries, because that's where we're going to see the greatest growth jobs in this country. Now, together, unions, businesses and conservation groups have identified 5 big but very specific actions that could see us become a global exporting superpower. Achieving this will require bold and coordinated action and investment in the development of a national clean export strategy. Over the past decade, some might have once called this an unusual coalition to be saying this, but we have reached a tipping point and it is now up to the Australian government to put Australia out at the front of the pack. But again, perhaps some sectors are not convinced by these numbers. Do industry experts really think that Australia is uniquely placed to thrive in a global net zero economy? Over the past winter, the WWF team commissioned EY to conduct a survey of over 50 industry experts to learn what actions they think is required. 96% of those surveyed agreed that Australia has the natural resources, the expertise to become a clean export superpower. The majority also agreed that a 700% renewable target by 2050 is very much achievable. But 81% of those surveyed noted that more targeted federal policy would help unlock Australia's clean manufacturing potential. In fact, the respondents warned that without that federal government support, ultimately Australia could lose its competitive edge in the renewable export market to China, the US, Germany, Brazil, Chile and the UAE, all of whom are ramping up their efforts in this area significantly. So the message is very much clear. Australia needs to act quickly as we face significant competition from other countries around the world. But there is good news in that our states and territories are leading the way in setting their sights higher than 100% renewables. I talked earlier about Queensland, but in 2020, Tasmania set a world-leading 200% renewable target by 2040, while South Australia has set ambitions of moving to 500% by 2050. And in the past few years, New South Wales has gone from zero to hero. But I'm actually not going to steal the New South Wales Treasurer's Matt Keane's thunder, who will talk about their bold and exciting plans later on this morning. But I also had a chance to talk to the South Australian Energy Minister, Dan Van Holst Pelican, in the final episode of my podcast series. Their 100 megawatt big battery at Hornsdale led the way. It was groundbreaking in terms of how the state managed their renewable energy supply. But Dan confirmed that while South Australia may have been an early leader in domestic renewable energy over the past decade, they are now starting to aggressively build the foundations to house an innovative renewable energy exporting industry in their state. But acting on climate will not only create jobs and ensure Australia prospers, it will protect our unique wildlife and wild places, because we know that failure to act in this decade will leave the places that we love more exposed to droughts, megafires and storms. In fact, the 2019-20 bushfires that we experienced here in Australia are a window into the future that nobody wants. So investing in healthy mangroves, healthy ecosystems are a highly effective way of absorbing carbon and offering protection to storm surges, using wetlands for filters and building drought resistance in our rural landscapes. We need more nature-based solutions for climate at a national scale, starting with the support for more resilient, climate-positive food production systems and the transition from native forest logging to plantations. With the right actions, we can literally shift Australia from being a deforestation nation to be a leading reforestation nation, which would benefit both wildlife, climate and people. We will be hearing again and again this week from Glasgow that the window of time for limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees is rapidly closing. Unfortunately, I feel that we will also see our federal government at the back of the pack. But rather than clinging to being one of the world's top global exporters of climate pollution, thermal coal and gas, we should be promoting Australia's export of climate solutions to the world, which can be one of our greatest contributions to the 1.3 target. Thankfully, as I've talked about today, and you will hear over the next few days, our state governments, Aussie industry, manufacturing sector and NGOs see this opportunity and are finally recognising that Australian innovation can bring us back to the front of the pack on climate action. So, is Gladstone our tipping point on the road to Glasgow? Only time, I think, will tell that. It has all the elements, the connectors, the mavens, the salespeople of the success needed outlined in Malcolm Gladwell's book. I do hope, however, that it does one thing. It helps change our nation's mindset to one of opportunity, and that we're able to transform Australia into being a global sustainability superpower. Thank you.